It's hard to believe that this past week was the last week of April. It's like, man, 2019 is going by quickly. But right now it's spring and we're really enjoying the temperatures, the sights and the sounds. Speaking of the temperatures, I don't know if they're spring temperatures. It's actually been in the upper 80s and has touched 90s a couple times. So it actually feels a little bit more like early summer. But it is a beautiful time of year. The roses are coming out on the farm, and as you look across our pond, you see the trees are just vibrant greens. It's just absolutely beautiful. And I've been outside so much that I actually have a pretty good tan going on right now. I don't know if you can see it on camera, but here's darker than here. So I definitely have my farmer's tan going right now. And it's just a really busy time and a really fun time. And we're raising chickens and ducks in an area that we're working to be a food forest area, and I really have been wanting to have a better water system for getting them water while they're in this area. So this past week I set up a water station for them, and this water is about 3 or 4 feet off the ground, and the watering tote is on top of it. And right now I'm using gravity to run a hose to their water in their area that they're in. And I ultimately want to use this area, collect the rainwater that comes off our pump house and where our wash and pack station is, to automatically provide water through a gutter system to supply water for that watering tote. So I won't really have to be hands-on with getting them water. So this past week I got the first phase of that project done. And I bet you're wondering, I bet you've seen the beginning of this video and wondering, Mike, what about your caterpillar tunnel that we just saw, that it was like, what's going on? It looks weird. What's wrong with it? Just the other day I was standing right out here and the wind was blowing so hard. It's blowing a little bit right now, but nowhere near as hard as it was blowing the other day. I think the winds got up to 50 miles an hour. The greenhouse here was fine for the most part, except the door slammed and the wind blew off the panels here on the door. But other than that, this greenhouse is fine. And as I was standing here, the wind was picking up really hard, and this really big, huge gust came, and I just watched it as it lifted up part of the caterpillar tunnel right over there and did a little bit of damage to it. So today I'm gonna have to work on trying to fix it back. Okay, for the most part, the caterpillar tunnel stayed intact. All of the posts along both sides stayed in the ground, all except for actually three here. And I watched them as they got lifted up, and the ropes came off of them as it was getting lifted in the air, and the middle bar was bent a little bit. We bent it back last night, but right now I'm just putting these back in place, and I am going to concrete the end hoops in just like I did on the main greenhouse. I had been wanting to do it. I hadn't been putting it off. I hadn't been procrastinating. I just wanted to excavate around these edges a little bit more before I actually went ahead and put in the concrete. But now that we've gotten most of the excavation done, I plan to put concrete these end posts in right away. But first we're gonna go ahead and place these other two before we do the end. And this was one of the posts that got ripped out of the ground. It was in the ground, I don't know, 18, 20 inches or so. It still got sucked up out of the ground. That is why I'm going to do concrete post on end. Here's an example of how the caterpillar tunnel works. You have your main middle bar, and then you have your hoops. Pretend this is bent. And then you have these clamps here that connect the middle bar and the hoops together. And as you can see here, the bolts, nuts and bolts, are at the bottom. And that way you have a smooth edge for your plastic to go over. I don't know how, but somehow the hoops that came out, it was like this. I'm like, how in the world did that happen? So I had to detach these, flip it around, put it back together.
When the lights are out and you stumble in the dark, you kept pushing on, but then you went too far. When your ship has sailed and all your dreams are lost, everything is wrong, you feel like it's your fault. Just remember.
And I learned from our other greenhouse that we had to have issues with the wind, that I need to concrete at least the 4 corner posts in the ground on top of having these ground posts be in the ground. It just adds to the security of that. And from now on, every single caterpillar tunnel and greenhouse that will be on our farm will be concreted in the ground. I had intended to do that with this caterpillar tunnel that we had issue with this week. However, I had to do some grading around it, so I just kept putting it off because of all the other busyness that's going on the farm, but we're definitely going to make sure we get that done.
You gotta leave now, it's time to catch the wind. You will climb up high and look through the clouds. And when you're feeling low,
Also this week, our greens are continuing to grow strong. We have our lettuces that are growing well, our Swiss chard is growing well, our kale, and let's see, what else do we have? Oh yeah, and our collards. Oh, and our microgreens. I haven't talked about microgreens much throughout these weeks that I'm talking about our greens, but microgreens is a great green to grow, and pretty much anybody can do it. My 8-year-old Selah, she is able to start the microgreens all by herself. And for harvesting our microgreens, we cut the tops off, throw them into a basket and let them air dry, because there is some moisture, especially right down there at the bottom close to the soil, that you want to let dry out before you bag them. And I use a fan, a really high velocity fan, to dry out our greens here on the farm, and I do the same with our microgreens. But this week the heat has caught me off guard, and a couple of our trays of microgreens actually got too hot and too dry, and they wilted. They went limp. It's like, oh, bummer. What do you do when you have limpy veggies? What do you do about that? Well, with the microgreens, if you haven't harvested them yet and they're still in the tray, what you can do is you can fill in the deep trays, because we grow our microgreens in shallow trays, and then we put the shallow tray into a deep tray. And the shallow trays have holes in them so the excess water can drain out. But what I like to do when the limpy microgreens, or the microgreens go limpy, is I fill up the deep tray with water, and I let the microgreens sit in water, so that way they get rehydrated, because that's usually what happens when your veggies go limp, is they have become dehydrated. So they get the water that they need to get strengthened up and get rehydrated, and that makes them upright and strong once again. And as you can see here, here are some of the ones that went limp. And then after I gave them water, here's what it looks like when they're strong once again and rehydrated. And depending how limpy your microgreens are, determines how long you're going to let them sit in the water. Usually when I'm watering the microgreens in the deep tray, I usually just let them sit in the water for about 15-20 minutes or so, because if they're not limpy and they're just the normal ones, if you leave them in water too long, they'll actually turn yellow, and you don't want that because they're pretty much gone, rotten, done by then. But when they're limpy, you give them water, and if they're real limpy, I usually let it sit for a few hours until I see them come right back up. So you make sure you want to watch that, and you can get them strong again. So now you have strong greens, not limpy, wimpy greens. And with what I have left over from harvesting the microgreens, I take that, put it in our compost pile, because I have been working on building up our compost pile, and that leftover from the microgreens is great for increasing the nutrients in your compost pile. The worms love it. This week, the microgreens weren't the only veggies to go limpy on us. This week I also had our salad mix and some Swiss chard that went limpy. And with salad mixes, with the lettuces and the kale and the spinach and other greens, they usually don't go limpy out in the field. They usually, if it gets to that point, they're pretty much gone. They've pretty much dried out and have died. But it usually happens after you harvest them, and it can happen in your refrigerator, in your cooler. And that usually happens just from a number of reasons, but it mostly stems from being dehydrated. And when that happens, most people will usually just throw it out and say, oh, they're no good anymore. But to rehydrate them, what you do is you fill up an area, fill up a container with water, with cool water, with cold water, put those greens in the water, in the cool water, and just let them sit. And over a period of time, depending how limpy and how dehydrated they are, it will actually rehydrate them, and they'll come back to being crisp. And then, bang! You have revived your greens. One of the ideas that I have had to combat this from happening is using storage bins inside the cooler to store veggies in, to protect them from the cold air from drying them out. In your refrigerator, most refrigerators, they have crispers at the bottom, which help maintain that, help control the humidity and help control the airflow to a certain degree. So, but with a refrigerator, you can only put so much in there. So I had this idea of taking storage bins, large storage bins, and putting the veggies in them and storing them in there, basically large crispers. So we just got these new bins. Most people go with storage bins that are just a little bit bigger than these. Most people are going with 17 gallons or so. And I believe these are, yep, 12-gallon storage totes. They're tough, pretty hardy. And I had this idea, since our walk-in cooler is taking a little bit longer than we wanted to see if these would work in a normal refrigerator. So let's see if they work. Booyakasha! So this is a great storage option for those of you who are growing more veggies and you're having only your refrigerator to store them in. So I'm excited. Can't wait to start using this system. I've tried a number of different sizes, but these 12-gallon ones here from Home Depot have worked excellent. They're really sturdy and they're made well, and they do an excellent job, and they fit in most refrigerators. And with our refrigerator, I can actually fit 2 of them in. And these storage bins actually help with another problem that we were having with our veggies. On top of them going limp with the refrigerator, getting some of the veggies, especially at the top where the cold air comes out, they were actually freezing. And once your greens freeze, it destroys the cells, and the veggies are no good after that. So I had to throw out some Swiss chard this week because of that. But now with our storage bins actually protecting them from that cold air, that is another positive for having these bins. So they work great, and I highly recommend them if you are using refrigerators for storing produce, your greens coming out of the garden, off the farm. Oh, and another thing that I want to mention about limpy veggies. Another way that it happens is when the heat is just too much for them outside and they've been exposed to the heat after they've been harvested for too long of a period. So ideally you want to harvest earlier in the cooler part of the day or in the latter part of the day when it's cooler as well. If you do it in the middle when it's warm and it's the hottest part of the day, you want to make sure you do it quickly and get them in the water to be washed or in your cooler as fast as possible.
So hard to see from the moment we arrive. Cornelia, you are one who will survive.
So no more limpy, wimpy veggies, but strong veggies. That's it for today. Make sure you stay tuned for next week, because we're heading out to Missouri for the Baker Creek Spring Planting Festival tomorrow, actually. So make sure you stay tuned for those videos coming up pretty soon. And because we look forward to heading out there and hanging out with people from all around the world who are growing and doing some pretty amazing things. So make sure you stay tuned for that. Also, please remember to like, subscribe, and share. Share on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, email, text, whatever, this video to anybody who you think will enjoy and appreciate it. That's it for now. We'll see you next time, and grow on. Bang. See you next time.